We have a distress signal. Reactor instability on Koval 9.
Closest coalition vessels?
3. All calculating travel risk.
Who else received it?
Checking now.
Earth did.
Station Koval 9 sat at the edge of the Meridian Corridor, that particular stretch of space where the navigational charts became suggestions rather than certainties, where gravitational drift from 3 competing stellar bodies made every approach calculation a negotiation between physics and confidence. It had been established as a xenobotanical research platform 14 years ago, staffed by rotating teams of scientists from 11 coalition member species, studying the improbable ecosystems that somehow persisted on the corridor's marginal worlds. Nobody built research stations in easy places. That was the nature of curiosity. Senior researcher Yana Orath had been aboard Koval 9 for 7 months when the cascade began. The initial fault was minor, a microfracture in the secondary thermal coupling of Reactor Bay 2, the kind of thing that maintenance logs noted and engineers scheduled. What transformed it from a footnote into a catastrophe was the simultaneous failure of 3 independent monitoring systems, each one theoretically incapable of failing at the same moment as the others, each one proving that theory incorrect within a 4-minute window. By the time Yana reached the emergency coordination station, the breach was already open. Not catastrophic, not yet. The corridor's atmospheric containment held. The primary reactor remained stable. The secondary reactor was, in the precise language of the station's damage assessment system, experiencing accelerated thermal destabilization, which was the engineering equivalent of describing a building fire as a localized heat event. She sent the distress signal herself, encoding it manually on 3 separate frequencies because the automated broadcast system had been on the same maintenance queue as the thermal coupling and had resolved its own failure in the least helpful possible direction. The signal went out at 0347 station time. The responses began arriving at 0412. The Coalition Emergency Coordination Office acknowledged receipt. The 3 nearest coalition vessels acknowledged receipt. The formal language of interstellar emergency protocol began its careful, documented progression through the appropriate channels: risk assessment, resource allocation, mission authorization, crew safety evaluation. All of it necessary. All of it proceeding at the speed that necessity and institutional procedure could achieve together. At 0419, a different kind of acknowledgement arrived. No formal channels. No institutional letterhead. A direct transmission on the emergency frequency, encoded in Earth Defense Force Communication Protocol, terse in the way that messages from people who are already moving tend to be. Koval 9. Signal received. Earth vessel Ardent Crossing en route. ETA 4 hours 17 minutes. Hold position. Captain Nessa VAEL, EDF Ardent Crossing. Yana read it twice. Then she looked up the Ardent Crossing. The information she found was not reassuring in a conventional sense. The Ardent Crossing was a Deathworld-class heavy rescue vessel, a category that Earth had developed specifically for operations in environments that standard coalition rescue platforms assessed as too dangerous to enter. It was not elegant. It was not diplomatically appointed. It was approximately twice the displacement tonnage of any vessel the 3 coalition ships could have sent, armored against hazards that most species hadn't encountered because most species didn't operate in environments Earth operated in as a matter of routine, and crewed by people whose professional qualifications included a minimum of 4 years active service in conditions that the Coalition's occupational safety framework categorized as extreme. The Ardent Crossing was built for the places where everything else had already given up. Yana found herself looking out the observation window at the cold dark of the Meridian Corridor, the amber pulse of the emergency beacon reflecting off drifting debris, and experiencing the specific emotional complexity of being simultaneously grateful and unsettled in ways she couldn't fully separate. At 0447, the 3 coalition vessels formally declined engagement, citing navigational risk assessment. Their rejection was filed, documented, and would appear in the operational record with complete accuracy. All protocols followed, all calculations correct, all decisions defensible. Koval 9's reactor continued its accelerated thermal destabilization. The next 4 hours were the kind that compress and stretch simultaneously. Yana managed her 43 crew through rotating emergency duties, kept the corridor atmospheric containment functioning through increasingly creative engineering, and answered the regular position updates that the Ardent Crossing transmitted every 40 minutes with the mechanical precision of something that did not stop once it had started. The updates were brief. They didn't explain themselves. Position update. ETA 341. Hold on. Then, ETA 258. Hold on. Then, ETA 133. Reactor instability reading elevated. Adjusting approach vector. That last one made Yana stop. They were adjusting their approach vector. In real time. For a reactor instability reading they were receiving from 4 light minutes away, recalculating their entry into the corridor to account for a hazard that was still developing. She had been in research science for 19 years. She understood instruments, data, careful methodical analysis. What she was watching was something different. The specific intelligence of an organism that had evolved to treat dangerous environments not as puzzles to solve from a distance but as spaces to navigate from inside. At 0834, the Ardent Crossing arrived. There was no announcement. No dramatic hail. The ship simply materialized out of the corridor's navigational haze at the adjusted vector, its bulk resolving from sensor ghost to solid reality with the unhurried presence of something that had been coming all along and had simply not yet arrived. It was exactly as large as the registry said it was, which was to say, considerably larger than anything Yana had prepared herself for seeing this close. The docking connection established in 7 minutes. The EDF crew came aboard in 9. Captain Nessa Vale was not what Yana had constructed from the voice on the transmission updates. She was lean and unhurried, perhaps 40, with a particular kind of calm that lives on the other side of having been afraid enough times to stop being surprised by it. She walked Coval 9's damaged sections the way people walk spaces they are working to understand, touching walls and listening to sound patterns, asking questions that were specific in ways that revealed what she was actually assessing. "Your reactor's thermal cascade," she said, in the station's main corridor, while her engineers spread through the adjacent sections with diagnostic equipment that didn't match anything in Coval 9's supply manifest. "The destabilization rate, is it linear or does it accelerate?" "The projections suggest exponential above a certain threshold," Yana said. "We haven't hit it yet." "We won't," Nessa said. "Not a promise. A statement about something she'd already decided. My chief engineer has worked 3 thermal cascades. She's interested in this one." Yana absorbed that. Interested. "She finds them genuinely fascinating," Nessa said, with a complete absence of irony that suggested she was describing an accurate characteristic. "It's useful. Passionate people work faster." The repair operation took 6 hours and 40 minutes. Yana spent most of it watching humans work in conditions her own engineers had assessed as too risky to approach, moving through the damaged reactor section with equipment calibrated for environments that would have ended Coval 9's crew in minutes if containment had actually failed. They were not reckless. That was the thing she kept arriving at, the thing that revised her initial complicated feeling towards something cleaner. They were not reckless. They were precise, deliberate, communicating in the compressed shorthand of people who had built a shared vocabulary out of shared experience. The chief engineer, a compact woman named Tor whose commentary ran continuous and enthusiastic through the entire operation, treated each new complication as a problem that had not yet revealed its elegant solution rather than evidence that the situation was unwinnable. At 1514, the reactor stabilized. The thermal cascade didn't reach its threshold. The corridor containment held. Coval 9's 43 crew members were, by every measurable standard, fine. Nessa found Yana in the observation bay as the Ardent Crossing prepared to disengage. "The coalition vessels filed accurate assessments," Yana said. She had been thinking about this. The corridor risk was real. Their calculations weren't wrong. "No," Nessa agreed. "You calculated the same risk and came anyway." "We calculated the same risk," Nessa said, "and decided it was ours to carry rather than yours." She looked out the observation window at the corridor, at the space the Ardent Crossing had navigated without flinching. "That's usually how it works." Yana considered the distinction between risk declined and risk accepted on someone else's behalf, and found it was doing something to a framework she'd held for a long time without examining. The Ardent Crossing disengaged at 1531. Its departure was as quiet as its arrival, a ship that had never needed to announce itself in either direction. Yana filed her incident report at 1600. Under responding vessel, she wrote the Ardent Crossing's registry designation, its classification, its crew count, and its arrival time relative to the distress signal. Under notes, she wrote 4 words: "Earth received it first." The report went into the Coalition Emergency Archive, where it joined several hundred similar documents from the past 9 years, incidents in difficult spaces, in marginal corridors, in the places where the calculations came back unfavorable and one species kept showing up anyway. The Archive's automated tagging system had developed, over those 9 years, a new category for this pattern. It had labeled it simply, human response.